All right, everybody, welcome back. You know what time it is? It's time for another deep dive.
That's right, another deep
And
dive.
today we're looking at something really foundational to the U.S., the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights.
Big ones.
Huge.
Yeah.
We asked you guys to send in excerpts from a guide called the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights, a guide for Americans and immigrants. And whether you're prepping for that citizenship test,
Yeah.
you're brushing up on some civics, or just curious about this stuff.
Just
We're going
curious.
to pull out some of those,
Yeah.
key nuggets,
Good stuff.
Yeah, the good stuff, the need to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Why? Well, because frankly, this stuff is important.
It is.
Whether you're an American citizen or you're an immigrant, these documents really lay out how the government works your rights, how you can engage with the system.
They really do, and it's interesting because, these documents come from a time when people had just overthrown a government,
Brand new country.
brand new, and they were really trying to build something different.
They didn't want to go back to a monarchy. They didn't want to go back to the systems that they had just fought to get away from.
Yeah, exactly. And so they said, you know what, we're going to do something totally new.
Yeah.
And that's how we got the Constitution, which actually replaced something called the Articles of Confederation.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about that shift? What was going on there?
Oh, the Articles of Confederation, that was sort of the first attempt at governing this newly independent country, but it didn't quite work the way they wanted it to.
It was like the rough draft.
Kind of like a rough draft, yeah.
Okay.
And under the Articles, the states, they had most of the power, and central government, it was really weak and ineffective.
So it was like herding cats a little bit.
A little bit like herding cats, yeah. And so in 1787, they came together and signed the Constitution.
Big moment.
A huge moment. And that changed everything. It created a much stronger national government, but it was very careful to balance that power. And it did that through 3 distinct branches of government.
Ooh, yeah. Let's talk about those branches.
Yeah.
Because we have the legislative, executive, and judicial.
That's right.
Like a game of rock, paper, scissors almost.
I love that analogy. I've never heard that before.
Each one keeping the other in check.
Yeah, keeping the others in check. Absolutely. So the legislative branch, that's Congress,
Uh-huh.
they're the ones who make the laws. They're like the rule makers in this game.
Okay, got it.
The executive branch, that's led by the president, enforces those laws. So they're like the referees, making sure everybody's playing by the rules.
Okay.
And then we have the judicial branch, the courts. They interpret the laws. They make sure that they're applied fairly. So they're like the judges. They're resolving the disputes.
So the Constitution, it's like the rule book for this whole elaborate system. It's setting the boundaries, outlining those powers that each branch has, but most importantly, protecting individual rights.
And that is where the Bill of Rights comes in.
Ooh, yes.
The Bill of Rights, it's the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, and it's all about protecting individual freedoms.
It's really amazing how, these amendments, they were written centuries ago, but they're still so relevant today.
Absolutely.
And, let's dive into some of the specifics, like the First Amendment.
The First Amendment, one of the biggies.
Freedom of speech,
Fun.
freedom of religion, that's huge.
You have the right to express your opinion, even if it's an unpopular opinion. You can practice your religion freely without the government interfering.
And that right there has fueled so many social movements.
Oh, absolutely. The civil rights movement, women's suffrage, even the evolution of art and music, all of these things have been shaped by the First Amendment.
Now, the Bill of Rights doesn't just stop there. It also tackles the justice system.
That's right. It makes sure that if you're ever involved in a legal case, you're treated fairly.
Exactly. And, we see this in Amendments 4 through 8. They lay out all these different protections.
Things like protection from unreasonable searches and seizures. That's the Fourth Amendment. So if the police want to come into your home and search, they need a warrant. They need a really good reason. And that warrant has to be signed by a judge.
It's not just a free-for-all.
No, it's not. They can't just barge in there.
Right. And what happens if you're accused of a crime?
Well, that's where the Fifth Amendment comes in. And specifically, the right against self-incrimination.
You have the right to remain silent.
You've heard that phrase, pleading the fifth right. You don't have to testify against yourself if you think it's going to hurt you.
And that's a cornerstone of a fair trial, right?
Absolutely. It is. It makes sure that the burden of proof is on the prosecution. They have to prove that you're guilty. You don't have to prove that you're innocent.
It's really mind-blowing to think that these rights, they're laid out in the Bill of Rights and they have such a tangible impact on all of our lives every day.
And then you have the 10th Amendment, which is really interesting because it emphasizes state and individual power.
So the federal government isn't all-powerful.
Exactly. It's not a free-for-all for the federal government, the 10th Amendment. It reminds us that power is shared.
It's kind of putting them in their place a little bit.
A little bit. It's saying, hey, there's limits to your power, and some powers are reserved for the states and for the people.
That's so important. And, it's crucial to emphasize that these rights, they're not limited to U.S. citizens.
Absolutely not.
They apply to everyone on American soil, regardless of their immigration status.
That's right. The framers of the Constitution, they knew that America was going to be a nation of immigrants, and they wanted to protect everyone.
That's incredibly empowering, especially for folks who are new to this country. It means they have the same protections. They can participate in civic life. And if they want to, they can pursue the path to citizenship.
And if you are pursuing citizenship, knowing the Constitution and the Bill of Rights is actually part of that process.
You got to know this stuff.
You do. You got to pass a test on it.
You have to.
But it's not just about passing a test. It's about understanding these core values of American democracy.
And it shows that you're committed to this country and its values.
Yes.
It's incredible to think about these documents that were written so long ago, and yet they still shape our lives every single day. They're living documents.
They're not just historical artifacts. They're living, breathing principles, and we're still debating them, figuring out how to apply them in modern times.
And we see that with things like the Second Amendment,
Yeah.
the right to bear arms.
Huge debate.
Huge debate. Very passionate arguments on both sides. How do we balance this right with the need for gun control in a society that's dealing with so much gun violence?
It's tough.
It's
Yeah.
tough. And it forces us to grapple with how the Constitution applies in our modern world.
And that's the beauty of it. It's a living document. It's always evolving.
So we've done a lot of unpacking today. We've talked about the Constitution, the blueprint of American governance, the Bill of Rights, which safeguards all of our freedoms.
Ooh, that was a lot.
It's a lot to take in. But understanding these documents, it really empowers all of us. It allows us to engage with this American system, to know our rights, and to see how they play out in our lives and in our communities.
So as you go forth and learn more about these documents, I want you to think about how these principles show up in your own life.
How do they affect you every day?
How can you use this knowledge to be a part of those conversations, advocate for your community, and make sure those rights are protected for everyone?
That is a great question for all of our listeners to consider.
It is.
So thank you all for joining us on this deep dive. And as always, we'll be back with another exploration soon.
See ya.
Bye.